My mother left me at the neighbor's house for 1 hour to get groceries but never came back. But 20 years later my biological mom shows up again. Benjamin Matthews, a successful graphic designer in his mid-30s, sat at his desk surrounded by the familiar hum of his studio. His life, though busy, was orderly and fulfilling, a stark contrast to the turbulent childhood he had left far behind. As he was finalizing the touches on his latest project, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. Expecting a routine update from a client, he was startled to see an unfamiliar name on the screen, Linda. Confusion gave way to a rush of old memories. Linda was his biological mother, a name he hadn't heard in over 2 decades. She was a ghost from his past, a chapter of his life he had closed long ago. His heart raced as he read the message, "Benjamin, it's Linda, your mother. I know it's been a long time, but I need to see you. Can we meet?" The message felt like a jolt from another world. Benjamin's thoughts raced back to his childhood, a time marked by his mother's erratic behavior and constant absence. Linda had been more interested in her next party or her next high than in raising her son. He remembered the confusion, the nights spent waiting for her to return home, and the disappointment that became a constant companion. His aunt and grandparents had been his saving grace. They stepped in when Linda couldn't, providing the stability and love he desperately needed. They never spoke ill of Linda, but her absence was a silent testament to her choices. His aunt had officially adopted him after Linda left him at a neighbor's house under the pretense of getting groceries, only to vanish without a trace. Now, 20 years later, the wound she left seemed to reopen with a simple message. Benjamin had spent years building a life devoid of Linda's chaos. He had found success in his career and solace in the small family he created with his aunt and grandparents. Yet, as he stared at the message, a part of him couldn't help but wonder about Linda. What had become of her? What led her to reach out after all these years? Was it guilt, curiosity, or something else entirely? The decision to respond weighed heavily on him. Part of him yearned for answers, for closure. Another part feared what reopening this closed chapter might bring. His mind flashed back to those nights of waiting, the false promises, the feeling of being left behind. Could he really face the woman who embodied these memories? After hours of contemplation, Benjamin replied with a simple, "Okay." Where and when? They agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, a neutral ground for what was bound to be an emotionally charged encounter. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with anxiety and introspection. Benjamin revisited old memories, trying to reconcile the image of the neglectful, drug-addicted mother with the woman who might sit across from him at the cafe. As the day of the meeting arrived, Benjamin felt a strange mix of apprehension and a deep-seated need for resolution. He left for the cafe with a sense of purpose, ready to confront the past and, perhaps, to understand the woman who had given him life but had chosen a path that led her away from him. The journey to the cafe felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of years and unspoken words. The cafe was a quaint, cozy place tucked away in a quiet street of the bustling city. As Benjamin approached, his heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and a surreal sense of curiosity. He spotted Linda sitting at a corner table, her eyes nervously scanning the crowd until they landed on him. She looked older, the lines on her face telling a story of hard-lived years, but her eyes held the same restless energy Benjamin remembered from his childhood. He took a deep breath and approached the table. "Linda," he said, his voice steady but tinged with a myriad of unspoken emotions. "Benjamin," Linda replied, her voice a whisper, laden with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thank you for coming." The initial exchange was awkward, filled with hesitancy and unspoken questions. Benjamin took the seat opposite her, maintaining a guarded composure. He noticed her hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her coffee cup. "I won't take much of your time," Linda started, her voice shaky. I needed to see you, to explain." Benjamin interrupted, "Explain? After 20 years? Why now, Linda?" Linda paused, collecting her thoughts. "I know I have no right to ask for your time or forgiveness. I've made terrible choices, hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I've changed, Benjamin. I've been clean for 10 years now." Benjamin's expression hardened. 10 years, he echoed, the years of neglect and abandonment echoing in his mind. "I was lost in my addiction, in a world that consumed me entirely," Linda continued. "I left you because I was a danger to you, to myself. It was no life for a child. I thought I was doing the right thing. By abandoning me? Benjamin's voice rose slightly, a mix of anger and pain surfacing. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Benjamin. I just want you to know that I regret every single day I wasn't there for you. I was trapped in a cycle I couldn't escape. The conversation shifted as Linda recounted her life after she left. She spoke of the years lost to addiction, the wake-up call that led to her recovery, and the small, humble life she had built since. She talked about the job she took to sustain herself, the support groups she attended, and the constant battle with the guilt of her past. As he listened, Benjamin felt a storm of emotions brewing within him. Anger, confusion, and a reluctant sense of empathy clashed within his heart. He had spent years imagining what he would say if he ever faced his mother again, but now, faced with the reality of her broken, remorseful demeanor, his resolve wavered. The meeting ended with more silence than words. As they stood to leave, Linda handed Benjamin a small, worn photograph of them together when he was a baby. I kept this, she said softly. It's all I had of you. Benjamin took the photograph, a tangible piece of a past he had long tried to forget. As he walked away from the cafe, he felt a sense of unease. The meeting had not brought the closure he had hoped for. Instead, it opened old wounds and left him with a profound sense of confusion about his feelings towards Linda and the life she had led. As the city lights blurred around him, Benjamin realized that this meeting was just the beginning of a journey he had long avoided, a journey into understanding the complexities of his mother's choices and, perhaps, the path to finding peace within himself. In the days following the cafe meeting, Benjamin found himself in a state of introspection, Linda's words echoing in his mind. He couldn't shake off the image of her, frail and remorseful, a stark contrast to the carefree, neglectful figure of his memories. Driven by a need to understand, he began delving into Linda's past, seeking out the truths that had eluded him for years. His first stop was the public library, where he spent hours poring over old newspapers and records, looking for any mention of Linda. He discovered a few scattered pieces, police reports of minor drug offenses, a notice about a rehabilitation program, and a small article about a community support group. Each piece was like a puzzle, slowly forming a picture of Linda's life after she had left him. Simultaneously, Benjamin began visiting places from Linda's past. He spoke to a few people who had known her during her darker days. A former neighbor remembered Linda as a troubled soul, often lost in her addiction but always kind-hearted. A counselor at the rehabilitation center recalled her determination to get clean, her struggles against relapse, and her eventual success. As Benjamin collected these stories, his perspective on Linda began to shift. He started to see her not just as the mother who had abandoned him, but as a woman grappling with her demons. He learned about the circumstances that led to her addiction, including a troubled childhood and a series of abusive relationships. It was a cycle of pain and escape, one that had unfortunately ensnared Benjamin in its wake. During this journey, Benjamin also revisited his own past. He went through old boxes of memories, finding letters and photographs he had long forgotten. Among them was a letter Linda had written to him on his 5th birthday, full of apologies and promises she never kept. Reading it now, Benjamin felt a mix of sadness and understanding. Amidst his search, Benjamin also sought the insights of his aunt and grandparents. They shared stories of Linda before her addiction took hold, painting a picture of a vibrant, loving woman who had slowly succumbed to her struggles. They expressed their own pain and disappointment in her choices but also acknowledged the complexity of her situation. As the days turned into weeks, Benjamin's anger towards Linda softened into a melancholic understanding. He realized that her addiction was a disease, one that had stolen not just her life but also the possibility of a normal childhood for him. This realization brought a sense of sadness but also a glimmer of empathy. Benjamin's journey of uncovering Linda's past concluded with a visit to a small park they used to visit when he was a child. Sitting on an old bench, he reflected on the myriad emotions he had experienced, the initial shock of Linda's return, the anger at her abandonment, and the gradual understanding of her struggles. As he watched the sunset, Benjamin understood that while he could never fully reconcile with Linda's past, he could begin to understand it. This understanding didn't erase the pain or the lost years, but it offered a pathway to view Linda not just as the mother who had failed him, but as a human being who had fought her own battles, however imperfectly. It was a realization that brought a sense of peace, a softening of the heart that Benjamin hadn't felt in years. The weeks following Benjamin's exploration into Linda's past were a period of deep reflection and emotional turmoil. As he processed the newfound understanding of his mother's struggles, he found himself grappling with a complex mix of emotions, a blend of residual anger, empathy, and an unexpected longing for some form of connection. Motivated by this internal conflict, Benjamin initiated more meetings with Linda. Each encounter was marked by a cautious dance of conversation, as both navigated the delicate terrain of their shared past and individual pains. They met at various parks, coffee shops, and once, at the very rehabilitation center where Linda had taken steps toward sobriety. During these meetings, Linda shared more about her life, the moments of despair, the flickers of hope, and the slow, painstaking journey towards recovery. She spoke of her regrets, the love for her son that she could never properly express, and the constant battle with guilt and shame. Benjamin, in turn, shared snippets of his life, the stability and love provided by his aunt and grandparents, his achievements and setbacks, and the void left by her absence. He talked about the walls he had built around himself, a defense against the uncertainty and abandonment he had felt as a child. In one particularly poignant meeting, Benjamin brought along his aunt and grandparents. It was a tense reunion, filled with unspoken grievances and cautious reconciliation. Linda expressed her deep gratitude to them for raising Benjamin, acknowledging the life they had given him in her absence. His family, in turn, conveyed their disappointment in her choices but also their understanding of the complexities of addiction. These conversations, though painful, were cathartic. They shed light on the multifaceted nature of human relationships, the capacity for hurt and healing, and the intricate ties that bind a family, even one as fractured as theirs. As autumn turned to winter, the nature of Benjamin and Linda's relationship slowly transformed. The initial awkwardness gave way to a more comfortable, if still cautious, familiarity. They began to find joy in small moments, a shared laugh over a childhood anecdote, a mutual appreciation of a piece of art, a quiet walk in the park. However, for Benjamin, the journey was also one of internal struggle. With each meeting, he felt the barriers he had built around his heart chipping away, yet he was also acutely aware of the protective instincts that cautioned him against fully embracing this newfound relationship. He was torn between the desire to understand and forgive his mother and the fear of reopening old wounds. This period of reconnection culminated in an emotional conversation on a cold December evening. Sitting in a dimly lit cafe, surrounded by the soft murmur of other patrons, Benjamin and Linda delved deeper into their feelings. "I spent so many years being angry at you," Benjamin confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "But now, understanding more about your struggles, that anger doesn't consume me like it used to. I'm not sure what this means for us, but I think I'm ready to find out." Linda's eyes brimmed with tears as she reached across the table, gently touching his hand. "I know I can't change the past, Benjamin. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of your life, in whatever way you'll allow." As they left the cafe that night, stepping out into the crisp winter air, Benjamin felt a sense of release, as if a weight he had carried for years was slowly lifting. He was beginning to understand that forgiveness wasn't just a gift to Linda, but also a step towards healing his own heart. The winter had passed, and with the arrival of spring, there was a sense of renewal in the air, mirroring the changes in Benjamin's life. The months of cautious reconnection with Linda had gradually paved the way for a fragile understanding between them. Now, as the trees bloomed and the city awoke to the warmth of the season, Benjamin felt a similar awakening within himself, a readiness to embrace a new chapter. The final step in this journey of reconciliation was perhaps the most daunting, a gathering that would bring together Linda, Benjamin, and the family that had raised him. The idea had been cautiously broached by Benjamin, and after some deliberation, all parties had agreed. It was to be a small gathering at Benjamin's aunt's house, a place filled with memories of his childhood, of stability and love. As the day arrived, the house was filled with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Benjamin's aunt and grandparents, while supportive of his decision to reconnect with Linda, still harbored reservations, a natural protective instinct for the boy they had raised. Linda, on her part, was visibly nervous, understanding the magnitude of the occasion and the grace being extended to her. The initial greetings were polite, yet tense. Linda brought a bouquet of flowers, a small gesture of her gratitude and respect. As they all settled into the living room, the conversation was initially stilted, hovering around safe topics like the weather and recent events in the city. Gradually, however, as they shared a meal together, the walls began to come down. Linda listened intently as Benjamin's grandparents recounted stories of his childhood, their pride in his accomplishments evident in their voices. She watched with a bittersweet smile, soaking in the years she had missed. Then, in a moment of courage, Linda spoke. She shared her journey, not to seek excuses for her actions, but to offer a glimpse into the life that had kept her away. She talked about her battles with addiction, the years of struggling to rebuild her life, and her deep regret for the pain she had caused. There were tears, moments of uncomfortable silence, but also nods of understanding. Benjamin's family, while they could never fully comprehend the choices Linda had made, began to see the person behind those choices, a person who, despite her flaws and mistakes, still loved her son. As the evening drew to a close, Benjamin took a moment to address everyone. "This journey hasn't been easy," he admitted, his voice steady but emotional. "There were times I thought I could never move past the hurt. But what I've learned is that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or condoning what happened. It's about freeing ourselves from the hold of the past. Linda, you're part of that past, but you're also part of my story, and I'm willing to see where this new chapter leads us." The gathering ended with a sense of cautious optimism. There were no dramatic resolutions or declarations, but a quiet acknowledgement of the complexities of life and relationships. As Linda left, there was a promise to stay in touch, to slowly build upon the fragile foundations they had laid. In the weeks that followed, Benjamin reflected on the changes in his life. He realized that forgiveness had brought him a sense of peace he hadn't known he was missing. It wasn't just about Linda, it was about healing the wounds of his childhood, about understanding that people are more than their worst mistakes. As spring gave way to summer, Benjamin found himself looking forward to the future, a future where the past no longer held a shadow over his present. He understood that the road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them, with a heart that was lighter and a spirit more forgiving.